The best form of rising up against this system is to simply refuse to comply with it. I've often said, imagine what would happen if the entire world stayed home for a day and didn't use their credit cards or spend any money for a day, 24 hours. Imagine what would happen. It would send a shockwave around. Imagine the people in Wall Street sitting there waiting for the numbers to change. They didn't move. They'd all have nervous breakdowns, I mean, it would send an incredible shockwave around the world if we simply refused to comply with our own slavery.
Okay, today, guys, I have a special guest. His name is Max Igan, and what I'd like to do is just have Max introduce himself to you. So take it away, Max.
Hey folks, I'm a radio show host. People call me a political commentator. That's the kind of the label they give me. I travel around the world doing lectures, and I've kind of been researching this for my whole life, kind of living on the outside of society. And I make films, got a YouTube channel, and blah, blah, blah. Just an activist trying to make a difference. So I travel around the world trying to inspire people to be the change that they want to see in the world, basically.
And what I've got up on the screen, Max, while you're talking, is your website. Actually, this is your YouTube channel, Surviving the Matrix, The Crow House. And then you've got thecrowhouse.com. Is that correct, if people want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's my website, thecrowhouse.com. Everything is there. All the links to everything I do is all on that website, and there's nothing to buy. It's all free, no subscriber section. There's over 2,000 pages on that website now. Lots of links to lots of stuff, a lot of good information. So get there and share that. And if there's a contact page there. I mean, if you want to know anything about me at all, you'll find it all on that website.
All right, sounds good. Let's just jump into some topics. And Max and I have not planned anything beforehand. We're just going to kind of have a conversation. And I've been listening to a lot of Max's videos here, and he's got quite a treasure trove of information here, and he's been interviewed quite a bit, as you can see from these videos right here on different news sources. And Max, let's just jump into the idea of just this whole thing about people really being on the Trump train, wanting to change their world. And I understand the conservative perspective where they're trying to get out there and they want somebody to be a front runner for conservatism. Do you think Donald Trump is the guy?
No, I don't think Donald Trump's the guy. I don't think anybody who gets elected to president is really the guy. I can understand people's need for change and their want for change and their belief that they may find the change from within the political arena, but I don't think it's really realistic. I mean, I've been in this position where, I woke up when I was very, very young. When I was 4 years old, I realised something was terribly wrong. And I've always kind of lived on the outside of society as a musician. And it's kind of given me a unique perspective, I suppose, because I've been kind of outside the zoo looking in. And what I see as government, what I see as the political system in every country, I basically see it as a multinational, multi-generational criminal cabal, which has superimposed itself over human consciousness and is masquerading as an international political government system. These people all work together, and it's one big crime family. It really is. They tie us up in all of this red tape and all of this stuff and all these beliefs, but really we don't need them. It's racketeering. If you look at government, I mean, why do you need government? You only really need government to make sure your country is secure. But who is it secure from? From the other governments. It's just the other governments. It's not the other people. You're scared of going to war with China, but China doesn't want to come and go to war with you. The Chinese government may want to face off with the US government, but it's the two governments. If you didn't have the governments, you wouldn't have the war. If you didn't have the governments, you wouldn't have all this tax, all this stuff, all the infrastructure, all the things that we've got in our society, such as whatever the company is that builds the roads and the company that supplies the food and all these different companies that do all these things. We don't need government for any of this stuff to run. Government just sits above it and says, okay, all you people who are doing all this stuff, expressing your creative potential and doing what you love to do or whatever, you've got to do it our way, and you've got to give us a cut of everything you do and make sure everybody who uses everything you create gives us a cut of everything they do as well. It's racketeering. That's all it is. I mean, that's all the government system is. So I don't see any political person addressing this. I don't see any political figure actually calling things for what they are. For all the things that Trump may be doing for people on the ground, he's doing all sorts of other stuff as well, like rolling out 5G, supporting the state of Israel and giving it free rein to just carry out mass genocide against the Palestinian people, supplying weapons to the Saudi Arabians so they can bomb the crap out of Yemen. I mean, there's so much going on that this guy's doing, which is terribly bad. And people just don't seem to be looking at that. They're concerned about what he's doing on the ground for taxes or this or that. It's all one big puppet show. I don't think there's any political solution to this at all. But even saying that, I mean, I don't say you shouldn't maybe get involved in politics. I mean, maybe people should. If we can get in there and undermine it from within, well, great, do that as well. I mean, do everything you can to undermine this system and expose it for what it is. If we could get some honest politicians in there to do that, great. But once they get in there and they start working within these two parties, either the left or the right, the Republicans or the Democrats or whatever, then they've got to abide by their rules, and so they're constrained straight away because the system itself is corrupt from its very foundation, from the ground up. So once you enter into that system, you're forced to abide by corrupt parameters to begin with. And you got to jump through so many hoops. Like you got to make 90% of compromises in everything you do just to get that 1, 5 or 10% of what you actually want to do possibly through. It just becomes a joke. It's an absolute joke, the whole political system. And it's just theatre. It's just this mindset that people have that they think that's the way out, when really I think the way out is within. The way out is for us to realise what we are and realise that this whole system only functions because we step outside of our moral compass every day of our lives to comply with legislation which doesn't serve our best interests, So, it's a whole backwards system. The whole thing's backwards. And there won't be any solution in politics until people can change their perspective of what they are and how they're prepared to interact with the system and interact with the world around them. Ultimately, it's got to come down to us.
Well, I constantly tell my audience that mainstream media and the government is focused on three main things, and that's to distract, deceive, and divide us. Of course, while they make a profit and while they bleed the tax cattle of more revenue. And I made a shirt a while ago. It breaks down the meaning of government. And governo means to control, and mentis means the mind. It literally means to control the mind or mind control. So what you say is true. We've got to get to the point where we refresh or reset or renew our minds and reload new stuff in there that's going to pour good stuff out of us. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
Well, yeah, this is it's just people's concept of what the system is and what authority is. Like I said, I've always lived on the outside of it. So to me, it seems obvious, but I can understand how this sort of concept is completely alien to people. Earlier on, we were having a conversation, but I put an example there for you when speaking to police officers in Australia here in the state of Queensland where I live. There was a time when a police officer said to me, you've got to abide by the laws of the state of Queensland. Now, while you're in the state of Queensland, you've got to abide by the laws of this state. And I said to him, what is the state of Queensland? And he just looked at me. I said, because I'm in a state of confusion. You're claiming that I'm in a state of Queensland. What is the state of Queensland? The state of Queensland is borders as defined by an area on a map. I'm not standing on a map. I'm standing on the earth. I'm standing on country. I don't understand even what a state of Queensland is. It's a state of mind.
Right.
When you're in that state of mind that you think you're in the state of Queensland or you're in the state of Arizona or the state of California, you're in that mental state where you need to abide by that legal system. It becomes real for you at that point. But it's a mental state. See, we don't even understand the language that we're speaking. When someone says to you, are you in the state of California? And you go, well, yeah, I am. Well, you're now in that mental state. You believe in that jurisdiction. You believe in those little borders that they draw on that map rather than just being part of the earth that you live on. It's a mental state. When you can start looking at authority and government as being that, I mean, perfect description, mind control. That's what the word means. And they tell us in these words, even when you're in the state of California, they're telling you in the words that you're in that mental state. What is a physical state or a mental state, So that's what we've got to think about with all this stuff. We just don't understand the language that we're speaking, and that's a big problem. It's a really huge problem. That's why people are running around with their, like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to find a way out of this system, thinking that there's a remedy in politics, when really the remedy is them changing the mental state they're in, believing this authority is real to begin with, and believing that this pen that we're in, that we call Australia here and you call the United States there, it's just a people pen. It's like a big people farm. You've got these governments over the top running the whole thing, and everyone's kept in their certain pens. They're given papers which allow them to go visit another pen for a while, but they've eventually got to go back to their own pen because it says so on the paper, which is just, again, a mental state. So it's a pretty precarious position that we're in. But when you look at it, I mean, it's diabolically clever, but it's really simple as well, seeing the way out. All it takes is a simple shift in perspective of what you are and what your relationship to this realm that you live in is.
Well, the question is, how do we do that? Because you're there in Queensland and you get harassed basically by these cops, but it's just you. So how do we bring other people along to buy onto this exact same idea? Which I'm kind of guessing that the bottom line to this whole thing is basically the golden rule, right? Do to others what you would want done to you. And if you see somebody not doing to others what they wouldn't want done to them, then they're kind of outside of the framework of what makes a good society, correct?
Well, yeah, to a degree, but even with that, I mean, I see a subtle shift in perspective that's even made with that statement, because I mean that's kind of out of the biblical, "Do unto others as you would have others do unto you."
A lot
I
of
don't,
people say that to me, but isn't it kind of true? I don't go out and hurt people, not because I don't want somebody to hurt me, but that there's kind of an element of that to it, right?
no, but think about the subtle psychological reversal in the statement, though. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. What if you're someone who enjoys pain and suffering and you're a sociopath?
I would think that would be
It's
that would that would definitely be an exception, I would think.
it would what the statement should say, really, when you think about it, is do not do unto others that which you would not have done unto you.
Yeah, and I think the converse statement is critical. I agree with you.
But that's, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a subtle reversal of morals in the original statement,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is an interesting thing, an interesting trick that's often played on us in a lot of the statements that we make and a lot of the things that we say. We don't see the subtle undertones. You know, I would not do anything to anybody that I would not have done unto me. You know,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
not inflict
Right.
pain against someone because I would not have pain inflicted unto me. You know, if you would do unto others as you would have them done unto you, well, maybe you like pain, maybe you like being tied up and whipped or something. You know, so you're going to go and do that to people. You know, so we've got to look at the way we're played in all of these things, the things that remove us of our morality in these subtle ways. Like I said, you know, we're forced to step outside our moral compass. If everyone did the right thing in all that they do, if everyone would refuse to allow anything to happen to anybody else that they would not allow to happen to them,
Hmm.
we could change the system in a day. We could step outside of the system in a day. All of the fiction, all the legal fiction would melt away. And you think about legal fiction and think about the law, what it's supposed to do. You know, we created a legal system out of necessity because we've got societies and people are here and they're all kept in a state of scarcity from this fiat money system. So naturally people get competitive. So we need a legal system. But the legal system's there to prevent the causation of harm and to provide remedy when harm is caused. But now we've got the politicians up there that are using the legal system against us to instigate the causation of harm against us, saying, you know, if you step outside these lines, we'll put you in a cage. So how is any of this law valid? How is it even actually law if it's being used to cause harm rather than prevent the causation of harm?
Yeah,
We just
because
don't look at it
yeah,
this way.
because that's the essence of government. It's the initiation of unjust force on people who haven't done anything wrong, simply because a politician wrote some arbitrary edict down, and now everybody's expected to obey it. If you don't obey it, then you get slammed.
Yeah, it's the most ridiculous system. It's the most corrupt system, and it breeds corruption, and it's absolutely ridiculous. You know, so we've got a legal system which perpetuates the causation of harm, and the whole system's based on terrorism anyway. You know, anything that you are forced to do under threat of punishment, this is terrorism by definition. If you look up the Oxford English Dictionary, the English definition of terrorism is violence or the threat of violence carried out against civilians as a means of coercion, often for political reasons. This is the basis of our scholastic system, of our social system, of our legal system. All of our systems are based on terrorism. You know, you must think this way or you'll be subject to punishment. You know, and again, it's because we are prepared to step outside our moral compass all the time for everything we do. And this is why when I was young, when I was 4 years old, and I got told we had to buy land, I completely freaked out. I couldn't understand the whole concept of buying land, that people had to pay to be here. I couldn't understand the concept of government owning the land. I remember saying to my mother, why do we have to buy it? And she said, well, we don't own it. And I said, own it? Who owns the land? And she said, the government owns the land. And I said, how did they get it? And she just said, you'll understand when you get older. And I was walking around in the yard with my teddy bear that afternoon going, man, this is all messed up. I've been born onto the wrong reality. These people think they can own land, you know. So, you know, that's kind of,
So you remember this thought process as a 4-year-old?
I remember very, very early things in my life. I remember when I was 18 months old and we were out on a barbecue and I was a toddler. I was still in nappies and I walked over and there was a cliff there and I'm looking down at the cliff at the rock, the surf breaking on the rocks. I thought it was incredible. And I wanted to tell my family about this incredible stuff that was down there. So I was just about to turn around and run back to them. And my sister grabbed me and took me back to the picnic. And everyone made a big fuss over how she'd saved my life. And I was trying to say, no, she didn't save my life. I was fine. I wasn't going to fall. I was coming back to tell you about it. But I couldn't talk. I could only go, and I was so frustrated that I couldn't get the words out to tell them that she hadn't saved me. I was fine by myself. I wasn't going to fall off. I knew what I was doing. And I got really, really frustrated about not being able to talk. So yeah, I can remember things back to very, very young. I'm kind of fortunate in that.
Do you see any way that we can actually eliminate this concept called government?
Yeah, I think it's a recent addition. I really do. Um, I think history's wrong. I mean, I've spent most of my life looking at history and trying to figure it out. This is one of the things that got me off the path of comic books and stuff and got me onto this path and made me so rebellious when I was young, like realizing the world was all messed up when I was 4. And then when I was 8, I discovered the pyramids and I started reading up about the pyramids and stuff. And I thought it was incredible. And I wanted to find out what happened in our history. And I think that our history is wrong. I think that history's been changed. I think that what we're fed in schools, what the academic system is there for, one of its main reasons is to teach us a false history, to create this explanation as to why we live in this ridiculous feudal government-controlled system that we live in now. But I think it's been a recent thing. I don't believe in the whole story of the Roman Empire and the build-up from there and everything that happened to them. I think a lot of it's been fabricated. I really do. Simply because of my travels and all of the monuments and artifacts I've seen around the place, I think the world was very, very different up until quite recently as 200 to 150 years ago, and things have been changed. So I don't think this whole government feudal system we've got now has actually been in place that long. So I don't think it would be that hard for us to get back. It's just what it's going to, what it will take to create some sort of an epiphany in people, some sort of spark of awareness in people. But they're so distracted by things. There's so much going on all the time. Even when you get them a little bit aware of what's going on, suddenly there's something happening. Mass shooting here or burning of Notre Dame there or whatever. Whatever they can do. So it's very hard to even get people's attention. So, but yeah, I don't think it's been that long, Brian. I really don't. I think our history's been fabricated for the most part. I really do. And it may sound pretty wild to a lot of people, but I don't know. It's just. I've spent a lot of years looking at this and I've never really been able to figure out some of the things that they call great mysteries. But then if I factor in the possibility that they've changed the timeline, like the Dark Ages just added that bit of 1,000 years and pushed everything back in history, 1,000 years back in time. Stuff that we're told happened 1,000 years ago didn't actually happen hundreds of years ago and stuff like that. When I start looking at things this way, a lot of the stuff begins to make sense. A lot of the artifacts and monuments and even the wars and battles and conflicts begin to make sense. So it's just something that I've been looking at. I mean, I can't prove any of it. I can't say this is. And that's what's the big problem with a lot of this research as well, even with what we do in the independent media and in activism is people making claims of this is, rather than just keeping an open mind about it and saying, well, this is a possibility. Let's see where the cards fall. But people make claims, they say this is, and then someone else says, oh no, this is, and then they start arguing and that's it. And you lose focus of the real details and the real points and the real issue at hand. So there's a lot of that goes on. So it's difficult. It's difficult to get people aware to this. I mean, sometimes I think we're making headway, but then something happens, some event happens. They are certainly making headway with the control grid, I'll tell you that. There's a lot of that going forward. We've got our first smart city coming here, just to change topic for a minute. The Chinese social credit system that so many people have probably heard about. Darwin in the Northern Territory in Australia is adopting Chinese-style surveillance system and it's becoming Australia's first smart city based on Chinese technology. So that's something for everybody to think about as well.
And that's coming in. That's coming to Australia.
That's coming into Australia. I saw a newspaper article yesterday in the Northern Territory News that yes, they are adopting Chinese-style surveillance system in Darwin, and it's going to have a smart future. Darwin. It's a small enough population for them to do it. It's kind of a capital city, but it's not really a capital city because the Northern Territory isn't really a state. So it's the best place for them to trial it, really, when you think about it. So, yeah, that's announced, and that's the Chinese system. And they even say in the article it's about surveillance, it's about tracking people. So, of course, it's going to lead to social crediting, and it's coming to all of our countries. I've been warning people about this for a couple of years now. First time I spoke
Okay, so
about it,
okay, so what should people do with this warning? I mean, what should the response be to these smart cities? Should people rise up against it? And if so, what's the basis for them rising up against it?
well, the surveillance and the tracking to start with, it's not good. But, how can we, it's just going to go that way. It's very difficult to rise up against it unless people will stop using their smartphones. And I mean, I don't own a smartphone. So stop using the smartphone, stop using a credit card. I've been saying this for a long time. And talk about 5G. I mean, get 5G out of your area, which is a big problem for you guys in the United States. I don't know how you guys are going to stop a deed unless you can do it state by state. We're actually having some success here because without 5G, they can't run it. They can't run this whole surveillance grid because they need the bandwidth of 5G to make it work in our
Right.
countries. So stopping 5G would be a good part. We've had great success here. There's a barrister who's on our side who knows the legal system really well. And he explained, he said, look, the legal system's got all sorts of faults and flaws, but it's a beautiful thing when you know how to use it. And he just pointed out that the criminal code, the state criminal code, can't be tampered with by the federal governments. And this may be the same in the United States as well. Whatever state you're in, you might find there's a criminal code for that state which can't be tampered with by any type of state legislation or anything else, the criminal code. So you'll find that within that criminal code, I think it's section 146 in the Queensland Criminal Code, I could be wrong, but you'll find that in that criminal code the definition of assault, what constitutes an assault against your person. I can threaten you. I could tell you I'm going to rip your leg off and beat you to death with the sloppy end. That's not a real assault because I'm not physically capable of doing that. You're not going to sit there living in fear of doing that. But if I say, hey, listen, Brian, I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to stalk you, and when you least expect it, I'm going to shoot you through your window. And you are in your house and you are living in terror. I mean, it's possible for me to do that. So now you are in a state of fear. I've just assaulted you without actually doing anything to you at all. I've assaulted you by putting you in a state of fear in your own
Hmm.
home. And when a person in their own home is entitled to quiet enjoyment in their own home. So if you are in fear of an electromagnetic frequency being emitted, you are under assault. And all you've really got to do, I mean, you can give them all these scientific explanations as to why you think it is, give them all the readings and all this stuff, and they can argue it in court, it won't stand up. But if you go to a doctor, go to a medical doctor and say, please give me a medical certificate and tell me the dangers of exposure to electromagnetic radiation, is it safe to me to be around one of these things? Will you guarantee it? You find no doctor will do that. They won't guarantee it. So they will write you out a medical certificate identifying that these things are unsafe for humans to be around. And then you can then take that to the power company and say, well, you are now in breach of 146 of the Queensland Criminal Code by having this tower here because I'm now under assault in my own home because I'm living in fear. Here's the reason I am living in fear. Here's the medical report. And they have no choice but to pull that meter down. And that's the success we've been having in Australia. That's how we've been going about it, and it's been working. So perhaps that will work in your states as well. Look at the criminal code of your state. Look at the definition of assault, what constitutes an assault, and approach it in that manner. And we've been having great success. So yeah, that's a good way of
Have you
stopping.
done Have you done a video on this?
No, I went to a meeting last Saturday, and the barrister was there because we've got a tower coming up here in the local area, and I went down there and I told them all my ways of thinking about it, and what the dangers of it are, how it's military grade technology, all this sort of stuff. And I spoke about abuse of office and all the sorts of ways that I think of. But I'd never thought about using the criminal code. It wasn't until this barrister walked up and he said, hey, Max, I've got something for you. And I heard this guy talk, and I just went, my God, this is so simple. This is so beautiful and so simple. It's beautiful in its simplicity, you know. And so I found out about it last Saturday. And he said, yeah, well, they've stopped it in this whole suburb in Sydney, and then now stopped the rollout of 5G in all of suburban Sydney, I believe, through this action this guy's taken. He's done it again in a town here in New South Wales. He's doing it in Hobart, Tasmania. We've got a guy in South Australia who's now adopting the same principle for his local area. So yeah, no, I've only found out about this a week ago, so I'm keen to get this information out to people. I'm actually thinking about getting
Yeah.
the barrister on the radio show and doing an interview with him so he can explain it because he can do it better than I can. I don't want to get anything wrong, you know.
That'd be great if you get that together and you get that interview going. Let me know. I'll definitely promote that. That's something I'm very interested in stopping for sure.
Yeah, but even he said, I mean, it's the American legal system is very convoluted. It's very, very different to ours. We've got the Westminster legal system here. It's all based on British law, same as Canada. I mean, what we're doing here, I know it will work in Canada. I know it will work in England because it's the Westminster system. So, you guys have to look at how you can adopt this to the criminal code in your own state and what constitutes an assault in your own state, and then get a medical doctor to give you the information you need to show that electromagnetic radiation is dangerous, which demonstrates why you believe you are under assault. I mean, you must have a criminal code in your state. And when you look at the logic of what I've just said then, regardless of what state you're in, there's got to be a way around this, because we are all entitled to quiet enjoyment in the comfort of our own homes. So I mean, that's the basis tenet of being a citizen or whatever, even under their law, and in all this whole fiction that they create. Quiet enjoyment. That's the basic tenet of life. If they're going to take your quiet enjoyment in your own home away from you, then there'll be a rebellion. I mean, that's the way it goes. So everybody's entitled to that. So if you're being assaulted in your own home, well, that does constitute an assault. If you're sitting there living in fear of this thing that's happening to you and you can't do anything about it, that constitutes an assault under any law. So, yeah, look into it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I like what you're saying about the fiction. Didn't Bastiat say the state is that great fiction by which everyone seeks to live at the expense of everyone else?
It is. That's exactly what it is. And we've got a whole world that's caught up in Stockholm Syndrome, And so it's
Yep.
such a scam. What a racket, man. Like, these guys just sit at the top. They control everything, say, hey, you got to do it our way and give us a cut. And while you're doing it, we're gonna milk half the wealth of all these people in taxes and all the stuff that we do. And every time we go out in public, they're going to fawn and go, oh, my God, it's the leaders. It's incredible. What a
Yeah,
scam. We just
it is.
adore these people, these slave masters. And look at the last century. I mean, government, you look at the world, government is the leading cause of death in the world. Always has been.
Yep.
The last 100 years, 200, what is it, 200, 626 million or 600 and something million people killed by their own governments, or
Two,
262 million people killed by their own governments in 100 years. Yeah,
yep, in the last 100 years alone. That's right.
yeah, it's outrageous. And that's not even taking wars into account. That's not even killing other people. That's just governments killing their own people.
So rather than asking, without government, how could we ever build the roads, the schools, the bridges? How could we ever have clean running water? We should say, without government, how could we ever die that many deaths? How could we ever have a body count so high? Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm on the same page with you. When we were talking earlier this afternoon, you had mentioned the concept of Larkin Rose's tiny dot. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. I mean, we just go along with it. People are saying you've got to do this or we'll put you in a cage, and we just step outside our moral compass all the time to go along with it. And he totally nailed it in that clip. I mean, it's just a bunch of people there. There's not many of them. It's like these laws that they put in place. Suddenly they're going to steal all your rainwater ever because like 10 guys in a room wrote it on paper that they can do that. They're going to come and put a fracking well in your backyard because a couple of guys wrote on paper that they can do that. Oh, well, I've got to let you come and destroy the environment around me and destroy my habitat, and there's nothing I can do about it because this guy over here wrote down on a paper that it's okay for you, a piece of paper that it's okay for you to do that. It's crazy. Why do we do this? And it's just because we don't support each other. What I was coming back to in the beginning of the conversation, we don't really have the respect for ourselves enough to respect people around us. If we had strong community, if we really had ties with our local community and ties with people, we just stand up and say, no, hang on, you can't do that. We actually employ you people to manage infrastructure for us in a responsible manner and to help the human experience move forward. It doesn't mean that, we employ you to put all these lines and rules around us and make us walk in this direction all the time. It's crazy, and you destroy everything around it. So we've got to let you do it because you write it on paper. And if we try to stand up, we just get knocked on the head because people don't stand up with us because we don't have the respect of our communities because we've never bothered to get to know these people.
Exactly. And everybody's doing their own thing, and they're distracted, deceived, and divided by the things that they're watching on TV and the politicians they're listening to. And just for the audience, while Max, while you're talking, you don't see this, but I've pulled up Larkin Rose's tiny dot video, and what this represents, what you're seeing right here, guys, is the mass of us. This is us, And this bigger dot right here is the enforcers, and the smaller dot is the political class or the ruling class. We far outnumber them, and if we would all just get on the same page, and all we have to do is agree on just a couple things, like it's not okay to initiate unjust force or violence on people who haven't done anything wrong. I think we can all get on board with that. And so when you see somebody committing violence, when you see a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump or an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wanting to initiate a $33 million Green New Deal or initiate red flag laws or bring in 5G, we can rise up against them because there's more of us than there are of them. But the only reason we can't get it done is because we are divided, and they want us to be divided, and that's where their power comes from when we can't even get together on the basics.
Well, yeah, and it's even with the rise up against it. I mean, you say that and people think, well, you want us to all, grab pitchforks and march to Washington or something. The best form of rising up against this system is to simply refuse to comply with it. I've often said, imagine what would happen if the entire world stayed home for a day and didn't use their credit cards or spend any money for a day, 24 hours. Imagine what would happen. It would send a shockwave around. Imagine the people in Wall Street sitting there waiting for the numbers to change and they didn't move. They'd all have nervous breakdowns, I mean, it would send an incredible shockwave around the world if we simply refused to comply with our own slavery. That's all we have to do.
Yep.
I mean, it's just an idea. Even the stuff they're writing down, all these new codes and all, it's just an idea. It's just the stuff you're writing down on paper. How does it serve us? It's not. It's not what we employ you to do. And you're doing all this stuff to protect us and from all these wars and stuff that you guys create. They create the whole lot. These people are psychopaths. The world is run by psychopaths. The world is run by criminals. It's a criminal gang. It's not a government system at all. It's a criminal gang masquerading as government. And we can fight against it all we want, but by fighting against it, we give it power. It's like when people learn all this legal stuff. I want to become a free man and all this stuff because they want to go in there and take the judge on and go, yeah, I showed him one. I won the battle, It's the completely wrong concept. It's a cloud. It's legal fiction, and we call it fiction because it's just an idea. It's a cloud. If you're learning all of this stuff and empowering yourself with this legal knowledge so you can go and fight a cloud, then how sane are you? This is not a sane thing to do. You arm yourself with the knowledge of who and what you are and simply ask the right questions and question this authority. Someone comes up to you in fancy dress and tries to take you home or whatever. You just ask them the right questions and you can usually get around it. I mean, I've lived on the outside of this system my whole life and I've always got around it. But even in saying that, I'm not suggesting that you just try to be arrogant on the side of the road with the police officer. They're one of them and two of you or whatever, or two of them, one of you. This is a bad idea. Even if there's one of them and one of you. If you're on the side of the road with the police officer, don't try to be smart with legal jargon. These guys have got IQs of about 102. They've got no idea, and they can hurt you, and they will because they enjoy it. So even if I'm pulled up by a cop on the side of the road with all the stuff that I know, for me it's like, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, because all I want to do is get out of your company as quickly as possible. If there's repercussions down the line, well, I'm prepared to go into the court and talk to the judge about that, no problem. And I'll get myself out of it. But I'm not going to do battle with a brain-dead police officer on the side of the road, and I do not recommend anybody does, because these people have the ability to hurt you, and it's your word against theirs, and they will hurt you because they enjoy it. So you've got to pick your battles with all this stuff that we're doing and all this knowledge that we have. But ultimately, the best form of rebellion against this system is to remain true to your moral compass. Don't step outside that for anything. And and view the people around you as yourself and treat them as yourself. I mean, do not allow anything to happen to anybody that you would not allow to happen to you. To me, that is what it means to be a good human. And if we did that, we'd change the world in a day. And that's the best form of rebellion against this system. It really is. Love is a revolutionary act in a system of universal hate, which is what we've got, universal competition, which is what we've got, which is why our societies are so dysfunctional, even through our education system. I mean, how dysfunctional and brutal is this? You got kids going to school being kept in these peer group classes where they're taught to be competitive with each other. The only influence they've got is from some teacher who's taking out all their repressed biological urges on the students, and you're taught to be competitive, and then you're graded as an A-class person down to a D-class person, depending on how well you can regurgitate what the teacher tells you on command. And they call this education. It's brutalization, it's psychological brutalization of children is what the education system is. And then you're thrown out into the business world and you're told to be ruthless in business, dog eat dog. But then you're taught, oh no, we've got to be tolerant, we've got to be this, we've got to be that. It's complete backwards dichotomy. You've got to be both things in order to function in the world. So you're completely screwed up to begin with as soon as you enter and leave the education system. They've messed with everybody by that time. So, what we need to do is get some form of way. I mean, I like to just get on a rooftop or a hilltop and just scream, stop. Just listen for 5 minutes, I reckon I could change the world if you could just get people to take that 5 minutes out, But honestly, Brian, non-compliance and compassion, respect for each other, you just stand up one morning and scratch your head and go, what the hell? I don't think I want to do this anymore. That would change the world.
Yeah, exactly. And you said, what would happen if everybody stayed home and just didn't buy anything for a day? Same with elections. What if everybody just stayed home and just stopped going to the voting booth and stopped participating in the politics of it all? What would happen? Because I've seen, the way I see it, the powers that shouldn't be kind of use certain social things as a barometer for how well their plan is going, their social engineering. And when you have the Democrats versus the Republicans, the conservative versus the liberals, that just shows them that their dog and pony show is working. It's still effective. And unbelievably, after this many years, people are still playing into that game. We are being played.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting in different countries. I mean, I've always encouraged that in Australia here. Just don't show up on voting day. Just don't show up. Just write no suitable candidates. If you go, just write that on the form and don't vote. Unfortunately, in America, you have a different system. Like here in Australia, it's compulsory to vote. Everybody's on the electoral roll. You get fined if you don't vote.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm actually
not know that.
I'm actually not on the electoral roll. Yeah, well, if that happened, because it's compulsory, if the population just stayed home and didn't vote, they wouldn't know what to do. There'd be a hung government. They wouldn't know what to do from that point. But in the United States, you have a different system where it's not compulsory to vote. So you could have 99% of the country refuse to vote. The politicians will still vote, guarantee it. And all you need is the right number of, you could have 500 people vote in the United States. You're still going to be able to elect a government as long as it's got a majority. So that's the system. In the United States, you kind of need to vote if you want to get change from within the system, but you need to have someone in there to vote for. Who's that? And where are they going to come from, So,
well, let's talk about Ron Paul. Are you familiar with Ron Paul?
Look, I've met Ron Paul. He's spoken in Acapulco. A lot of people seem to like him. I don't know. I don't know. I find it very difficult to trust anyone from the state at all. I really do. I mean, I see the whole thing as fiction.
Yeah, of course.
And even with Ron Paul, I mean, sure, he says a lot of good stuff, but he doesn't say the real stuff. What it means to be human really is what it all comes down to, the fact that we don't need government. I haven't heard any politicians say that yet. And so I don't have a lot of faith in any of them,
Yeah. As far as his free market ideas and his libertarian principles, they're just, they're right down the line. But for me, I've told people this often. I was a delegate to Ron Paul's convention. I was a delegate for Ron Paul back in 2012 for my state convention. And if he ran again, I couldn't vote. I can't vote. It's against it's against what I believe now to vote, because I believe when I cast my vote, I'm participating in a system that is corrupt from the top to the bottom, and I just can't do it.
Well, that's me as well. That's my problem with the whole thing. I mean, like I said, I can understand if people want to get involved in politics and go in there to undermine it from within. Great, do your stuff and see what you can do. But that'll be you doing that. You don't need my vote. It's only one vote, and I'm
right.
I'm not going to start now because I don't believe that's the way. But by the same,
and even if you had the right guy in there, I don't believe the president's the guy in control. He's not the one pulling the strings. He's not the one calling the shots. The powers that shouldn't be are calling the shots, and they're probably all in Israel.
Exactly. I mean, if the president was calling the shots, Trump would have his wall built already, wouldn't he? So,
yeah.
That should be a good sign for everybody. Yeah, I mean, Israel's who's pulling the strings in most of the world. Israel's who's pulling the strings in America and in my country, in Europe and in all over the place. That's something that we just don't hear about because you're not allowed to talk about that. That's anti-Semitic.
Right. Well, let's since we've already gone into this a little bit, what is your view of Israel? And when we talk about the elite or the powers that shouldn't be, or the Rothschilds international banking cartel, who exactly are we talking about? Are they the top of the food chain as far as our human enemy is concerned?
Well, that's a good question. It's really a good question. It could be. I mean, people may say it goes beyond that, but this is something I've often said as well. You can speculate as whoever you want, and whoever you want to believe it is. You give me 2 days to put together a slideshow and a presentation, and I'll get together a realistic presentation to convince you that you're right, because all the information is out there for me to do so. It doesn't matter which direction you want to go in. But when you look at the world and you look at the state of the world, look at what's happening in Europe now with this mass migration, how all the European countries are being undermined by this migrant influx. This is outlined in a 1928 document called the Koldenhof-Kalergi Plan, which is a Jewish document which talks about genociding the people of Europe via mass migration. You can see all sorts of documents that talk about this. You can see all sorts of interviews with Jews themselves who say that they intend to change the social structure of Europe over a 100-year period. A lot of Europeans won't like it, but it needs to happen, rah, 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 rah. And they won't like the fact that it's the Jews behind it, but, well, we are, and that's just the way it goes. And there's interviews you can find on YouTube that will tell you all this sort of stuff. You look at the restructuring of the Middle East, you look at Oded Yinen's plan for Greater Israel, and you can see this is what's going on through there as well. So, yeah, there's look what just happened. The burning of Notre Dame is very interesting, that Notre Dame Cathedral would be burning at the same time as Al-Aqsa Mosque is burning in Jerusalem as well. These are a main Christian emblem and a main Muslim emblem. I mean, not the main emblem, but if you really look at it, if you look at the comparison of, say, the center of the Christian faith being represented by the Vatican, the center of Muslim faith being represented by Mecca, well, the next one down the line would probably be Notre Dame Cathedral and Al-Aqsa Mosque. And both of these happen to be burning at the same time the other day, which is kind of interesting, I thought. So that, of course, makes me question the motives of Israel. And, I mean, it's uncomfortable to really want to say this sort of stuff, but really when you look at the history of false flag terrorism, and I did a radio show actually a couple of years ago called A Brief History of Government-Run False Flag Terrorism, or A Brief History of Government False Flag Terrorism. By government to be false flag attacks carried out by government. And you look at them, there's Jewish fingerprints on so many of them that it just, you start to see a pattern after a while. And yeah, I mean, I think there's Israeli influence in all of our governments to a ridiculous degree. As said by Voltaire, those who, if you want to know who rules you, just look at those you are not allowed to criticize. And there's a lot to be said in that statement. There really is. And even the stuff you can say, it's interesting. You can criticize any government for the atrocities it carries out. You can talk about Gaddafi's government for the things it did. You can talk about the United States government for the things it does, the British government, whatever. But you cannot talk out about the Israeli government. If you talk about the Israeli government, suddenly you become an anti-Semitic Jew hater. And if people can't see that this is a social construct, I mean, this is mind control.
Still so many questions.
Because I'm not talking about the Jewish people. I'm talking about the government of Israel and the atrocities that it constantly carries out and the inordinate influence that the Israeli government has over foreign governments as well. You can see this simply by the amount of dual citizens that exist in all foreign governments. You can see the enormous amount of leeway and slack that's given to this nation, the amount of war crimes it's committed, been named openly by the United Nations as committing war crimes. And no matter how much the United Nations says, oh, well, this must stop and this must stop, nothing ever changes. So, it becomes pretty obvious to people. And when you get to the point where you're accused of being anti-Jewish for criticizing a government, well, perhaps that should be a warning bell and a red flag for anybody, because by speaking out against Israel, you're not criticizing the Jewish people unless they want to make it that way. But the Israeli government hides behind the specter of the Jewish people to carry out an enormous amount of crimes, and I think it needs to be named and identified for what it is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You mentioned well, actually, we didn't even really talk about the left versus right paradigm. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Left versus right paradigm. I mean, look, there is no left and right. It's a puppet show. It's appealing to our tribal mentality. We can get on. We can get onto a team.
In other words,
Yeah,
I was listening to the reason I asked that is I was listening to a podcast of yours earlier this afternoon, and you had said that Donald, they never switched the coin. They just flipped it over. Donald Trump's face is on it this time. Somebody else's face will be on it the other another time.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, remember when Obama was elected? Wow, the first black president, we're going to see some real change now, and how quickly that turned pear-shaped, And then Donald Trump gets elected, and wow, it's Donald Trump, and we're going to see some massive change now. And, another 4 years from now, it'll be someone else, and, people will have forgotten. But it's the same thing. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. He's just got a little bit more bravado. I actually think he's got away with a lot more than anybody else could have got away with, because he's kind of had the truth movement kind of kept there in a little basket. He's been feeding them little breadcrumbs, thinking, tricking them that he's on their side. And in the meantime, look at the 5G rollout that he's doing. Look at the inordinate amount of funding that he's giving to Saudi Arabia, and the manufacturing of wars, up and down and back and forth with Russia. We don't know whether we're friends or enemies with this country half the time. What's going on with any of this stuff? It's just completely. It's a puppet show. It's more theatrics than I'm seeing with any other president. I've got to say that. It's certainly entertaining, but
Yeah.
nothing's changing. Nothing's changing on the ground. I mean, people are saying all this change is coming and all these mass arrests. The Q tubers, Q's going to
Well,
save the day.
that's exactly my next question, because you mentioned breadcrumbs, and when you said that, the first thing I thought of was Q. So, care to give your comments on Q?
Well, it's been ongoing for like 18 months, nearly 2 years now. Mass arrest. It's going to happen. It's coming. It's coming. It's imminent. It's coming. Don't do anything. Don't rock the boat. Here's another little breadcrumb for you. All cryptic. You've got to sit there and figure out and go, oh, look, he means this. I'll give you my interpretation of what he meant. Why don't you just say what he means? So all breadcrumbs waiting for these mass arrests. How long does it take to get in the police car, drive down the block and arrest Hillary Clinton? How long have we been waiting for this now? And she's going on TV now praising the arrest of Assange and all sorts of stuff. She's not getting arrested. She's never going to get arrested, not at this rate. I mean, why would anyone think that this is anything but theatre? But first I heard it was going to be last November there were going to be mass arrests, and then it was going to be March there were going to be mass arrests.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep hearing it's just, oh no, they've got to put more in place. They're preparing to tell the people the truth. Why do you have to prepare to tell people the truth? Why don't you just tell them the truth? Oh no, they can't handle it.
Right.
We got to shoot. They wouldn't handle if they knew. All deep state operatives. We got to do this. Was like McCain's death. This was a secret assassination, so the people don't know. Of course, it's a secret assassination, which is why you're posting it on a chat forum on the internet, because it's so damn secret. I mean, it's just theatre, brother. It's theatre for the masses, just to keep people waiting there, eating the popcorn, waiting for something big to happen, but don't ever actually make any personal change in your own life. Don't ever change the way you actually apply yourself to the world around you. Just sit there, keep watching the reports, and eventually you'll get the newsletter telling you it's safe to go outside now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the reason I asked you is because I've told my audience many, many times that the reason I don't trust Q is because the plan that Q is telling us to trust is to trust that there are good guys inside of government that will vanquish the bad guys inside of government and make society a way better place.
Yeah. Well, government is formulating the plan to save society from government. I can see it all now. Sounds great on paper, I'm sure.
No, and it does sound good on paper, but what do you think it is in the mentality of the masses that really gravitates toward this? Because, hook, line, and sinker, whether you're talking about the cult of personality for Obama or the people who are still following the Clintons, which I do not understand at all, and now you got people following Trump and trusting the plan with Q. What is it inside the mind of the masses that needs? Why is it there? Why are people following these people so readily, so quickly, and so absolutely?
Because they don't want to take responsibility for themselves. They don't want to have to, they want the world to change, but they don't want to actually have to do anything to make that change. And also, there's a great line in the Hunger Games. In the Hunger Games, when they're in the Rose Garden and the figure, I can't remember his name, the British actor who played the old guy with the beard, and he said, do you know why we have a winner? And the other guy said, no, why? He said, you know why we just don't kill them all? He said, hope. Because if you take away hope, then there's nothing left. If you take away hope from people, they will rebel, they will fight back. So you have to create something like Q to provide that hope for them. Because otherwise they will come face to face with the reality that they're in, and they may actually bring about some change. They may just have had enough and realise that, hey, my back is finally at the wall, I have to do something. So you've got to provide something like Q to tell them that it's imminent, to tell them that there's hope, to tell them that disclosure is coming. They've already booked the airtime. This is happening. I've got insiders and I've got deep state reports and I've got this and I've got that. And I'm the one who knows and it's all good. Just wait. It's coming. Don't rock the boat. Without
Hmm.
that, society would actually, people would actually stand up and do something. So it's a defense mechanism. It's a pressure relief valve. And without that, society would implode.
Okay, so let's wrap this up by just in your opinion, what is it that people can do right now to take that responsibility for themselves, to be self-determined, to be the change that they want to see in the world? What's the first step? What should they do?
Well, look, life is an emotional mirror. That's what's got me through this whole thing, realizing that it's an emotional mirror. That's what, I mean, I was a misfit for the first half of my life. I was a social misfit. My life was a train wreck until I was about 40 years old. And I had
In terms of what? In what
well, I
way?
was just a lost musician. I realized the world was all messed up. I got kicked out of all my high schools. I became a musician because I just didn't want to participate in the world. But I became very withdrawn as well. I mean, I was very depressed for a lot of times. I knew all this stuff, but I didn't really know how to apply it to the world. And I was a train wreck, really. That's what I mean. You don't have to be born to be some spiritual guru or anything. It doesn't matter what state your life is in. It's a realization you can have. When I realized that life is an emotional mirror and it's what you do with it, I removed all stake in the outcome of my actions. I'm only here for a breath. This is just a temporary ride through here. It's just a journey through this realm, whatever this realm is. That's why it's not even point arguing about what the shape of it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my life in any way, shape or form, you know. But it's realizing this, and that's what gets me through. No stake in the outcome of any of this. I just observe and I offer my perspective on what I see. And I can see a better way for the human experience to be happening. I can see a better way for the human condition to be functioning, a better way for people to treat each other than what they do. And so I express that. And I attempt to make a difference in that way by being a pleasure to be around, helping people as much as I can, giving to people as much as I can. And the more I give to people, the more I seem to come back to me in return. It just works that way. That's the way the universe works because it's a mirror. And I give to people unconditionally. I don't have any stake in the outcome of what I give, and life just works for me. And I'm not saying I'm some wonderful person who goes out giving presents to everybody all the time. You've got to understand and put it in perspective. But I'm just that sort of I give of myself and I give of my time. I don't place an economic value on anything, and I have no stake in the outcome of anything that I do. So that removes fear from the equation. So I have no problem in questioning authority and speaking out. And I've reached a lot of people. I've reached thousands of people. I've made a difference in my local community here by inspiring people around here, like with these 5G meetings and some of the stuff we've had, council meetings. They're going to put a Jewish foreign exchange student school down here in a valley next to this beautiful rock pool. I went and spoke to the council about that in front of the local valley people. They all got up and cheered, and that inspired them. And that is a massive action against that school. It appears to be stopping that as well. So there are things you can do if you apply yourself, but you've got to, all these spiritual understandings we have and all this inner growth that we do, we just, we get this and we tend to stay inside and we just sit in this little bubble of spiritual narcissism thinking the world's going to change if I stay in love and light and high vibration. They don't realize you've got to get these spiritual understandings and apply it to the people around you, because the people around you are yourself. I finish every radio show with In Lakesh, which means I am another yourself. As soon as we can start applying that to our relationships, we'll change the world. It's a ripple effect. And if everybody had this like an epiphany of just this realization of who and what they really are and saw the true value in themselves enough to see it in others around them, we could change the world in 3 seconds, Is that going to happen? No, probably not. But, even if people start changing their perspective, we could change it in a day if people just stop stepping outside their moral compass all the time. That's the key to the whole thing, Brian. It really is.
Yeah, and so you blew by that real quick. In Lakesh means what?
I am another yourself. It's a Mayan greeting. You meet someone in the forest you've never seen before. In Lakesh. I'm another yourself. What's life like from your perspective of reality? If you think of, what your body is as being a biological organism with a strand of DNA in there, and it all operates according to electromagnetism. Everything you experience is electromagnetic. You know, every touch, every thought, every sight, it's all electrical frequencies and signals going around your body. You've got a strand of DNA in your body which is tuned to a specific frequency which is unique to you. But your consciousness isn't local to your body. It exists in the surrounding field because surrounding field isn't empty. It's full. You know, if you think of matter, matter is simply divisions in space, but it's the space that's real, and the space is full of energy, and that's where consciousness lives. And your body simply harvests one frequency of that energy, that universal consciousness of God or whatever you want to call it, of which we are all part of. And you experience that as Brian. And this body that I'm in has a strand of DNA which harvests a different frequency from that field that I experience as Max. But ultimately, we're the same consciousness. We come from the same place. There's really only one of us here. You know, we're just looking at the world from a unique perspective that was given to Brian and was given to Max in this vessel that we inhabit, so we could experience the world from that unique perspective that we have. You know, and when we can realize that about ourselves and realize that about others, it becomes an incredibly wondrous place. Just the fact that you can have a consciousness here like us having a conversation with itself and finding out about itself this way. This is how it works. You can even think of this as an experiment where God is trying to figure out how God became God or whatever. I mean, whatever's happening, whether it's a place where we come to grow our souls or what it is. I mean, it's a wondrous thing. We can speculate. It's the fact that we can speculate on these things is a wondrous thing. And there's so much incredible beauty and so much wonder about this world. And when you can look at it through the right type of eyes, suddenly all the barriers between all the people break down. And when you get to that point, you know, the respect for authority breaks down because it's a fiction. The guy there in the suit, he's just acting the way the suit tells him to act because he's wearing all these sigils and power symbols all over him, which give him this energy, which makes him feel like he should be a police officer. You know, but really you get beneath that and get beyond that and start talking to the man. You know, you find a whole different thing in there. So, and it's the same with everybody. It's the same with politicians. It's the same with anybody. So that's basically what that saying and word means, and that's basically how I live my life. That's basically my philosophy in life and how I interact with people, you know.
Man, that that really resonated with me, man. I appreciate your time. Okay, so your YouTube channel is The Crow House and your website is thecrowhouse.com. Guys, he's got 174,454 subscribers right now. If you like what Max said here and you want to see some more videos, you got a whole lot of videos right here for them to watch, Max. Just check out some of them. If you like what you see, subscribe, hit that bell notification icon. I'll leave all the links in the description below. Max, I really, really appreciate you spending time with us.
Absolute pleasure, Brian. Happy to do it again anytime, brother. I have to stay in touch and catch up, have a chat. Stay connected.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
All right, brother. Bye-bye.